when a wealthy real estate mogul destroyed my old military truck and mocked me as just another broke veteran. He had no idea I was about to expose his million-dollar fraud scheme against military families. But would you believe what happened when an entire convoy of military trucks surrounded his mansion the very next morning? I never thought buying milk and eggs would change my entire life. But as I sat in my old truck that Tuesday morning, watching the steam rise from under the crumpled hood, I knew something big was about to happen. Let me back up. My name is Jake, and I'm a 45-year-old Marine veteran. I served 3 tours overseas before coming home to a quiet life in our small town. My truck was a 1998 Ford pickup that I bought right after leaving the military. She wasn't pretty, with her faded blue paint and rust spots, but she was mine. Every dent told a story, and every scratch was a memory. That morning started like any other. I woke up at 5 a.m. out of habit, made my coffee black, and checked on my neighbor Mrs. Chin's cat like I did every day. The little orange tabby had been coming to my porch for months, and I always left out some food. Simple things like this made me happy after all the chaos I'd seen in the war. My daughter Sarah had called the night before asking me to pick up groceries for her kids. She was working double shifts at the hospital, and I loved helping out with my grandchildren. Tommy was 8 and loved when I told him stories about my truck. Little Emma was 5 and always wanted to ride in the front seat, even though Sarah said it wasn't safe. I climbed in my truck and turned the key. The engine coughed and wheezed like it always did, but after a few tries, it came alive. The radio was stuck on the oldies station, playing songs from when I was young. I sang along to Sweet Caroline as I drove through town, waving at people I'd known for years. The grocery store parking lot was busy for a Tuesday morning. I found a spot near the back, away from the fancy cars. My truck looked out of place next to all the shiny SUVs and sports cars, but I didn't care. I was proud of what I had earned with honest work. I was walking back to my truck with 2 bags of groceries when I heard the squeal of tires. A massive black SUV came racing around the corner way too fast. The driver had a phone pressed to his ear and wasn't looking where he was going. I could see what was about to happen, but there was nothing I could do. The SUV slammed into the front of my truck with a sound like thunder. The impact threw me backward, and I landed hard on the ground. My groceries scattered everywhere, milk spilling across the hot pavement. For a moment, everything was quiet except for the hissing sound of my truck's broken radiator. Then the SUV's door opened, and out stepped a man in the most expensive suit I'd ever seen. He was tall and thin with perfectly styled hair and shoes that probably cost more than I made in a month. He looked at the damage to his SUV, which was just a small scratch on the bumper, then looked at my completely destroyed truck. "Are you okay?" I asked, getting to my feet slowly. My back hurt, but I'd been through worse. The man didn't answer. Instead, he pulled out his phone and started taking pictures of my truck. Then he looked at me like I was something stuck to his shoe. "This piece of junk shouldn't even be on the road," he said, his voice cold and mean. "Look what it did to my Escalade." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Sir, you hit me. I was parked." He laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. "Parked? You call that parking?" This rust bucket was taking up space that real cars need. Other people in the parking lot had stopped to stare. I saw Mrs. Patterson from the flower shop shaking her head. Tom from the hardware store was walking over to help, but the man in the suit held up his hand. "Stay back," he said. "This is between me and the old man." Old man. The words hit me harder than a crash. I was 45, not old. I'd served my country with honor. I had earned respect, but this man saw me as nothing. "I'm calling my insurance company," he said, dialing his phone. "They'll handle this mess." While he talked on the phone, I looked at my truck. The front end was completely smashed. The headlights were broken, the bumper was hanging off, and there was fluid leaking everywhere. This truck had been with me through everything. It had carried me to job interviews when I first got home. It had taken Sarah to the hospital when the kids were born. It had been there for every important moment of my civilian life. The man finished his call and walked over to me. He pulled out a business card and flicked it at my feet like I was a dog. "Marcus Wellington," he said. "Wellington Real Estate Empire. My insurance adjuster will be here in an hour to write off this pile of scrap metal. You'll be lucky to get $800 for it." $800. I had paid more than that for the truck 10 years ago, but I knew he was right. The truck was old, and insurance companies didn't care about the memories inside. Maybe this will teach you to get a real car, Marcus said, walking back to his SUV. Something that belongs in a place like this. As he drove away, I stood there in the parking lot surrounded by spilled milk and broken glass. Tom came over and put his hand on my shoulder. "Jake, I'm so sorry," he said. "What a terrible man." I picked up Marcus's business card from the ground. Wellington Real Estate Empire. The card was thick and expensive, with gold letters that caught the sunlight. I had never heard of the company, but clearly Marcus thought he was very important. The insurance adjuster arrived exactly 1 hour later, just like Marcus had said. He was a thin man with glasses who looked at my truck for about 5 minutes before shaking his head. "Total loss," he said, writing on his clipboard. "We can offer you $800, minus the $500 deductible. That's $300. $300. For 10 years of memories and reliable service. For the truck that had never let me down, even when everything else in my life was falling apart." I called Sarah to come pick me up. When she arrived, she was furious. "Dad, are you hurt? Do you need to go to the hospital?" "I'm fine," I said, but I wasn't. My back hurt, my pride was wounded, and I felt smaller than I had in years. As we drove home in Sarah's car, I kept thinking about Marcus Wellington and his expensive suit and his cruel words. I thought about how he had looked at me like I was nothing, like my service to my country meant nothing, like my whole life meant nothing. But Marcus Wellington had no idea who he was dealing with. He didn't know about the phone calls I was about to make, or the friends I had in places he couldn't imagine. He thought he had one, but this story was just beginning. The next morning, I woke up feeling like I'd been hit by a truck, which I guess I had been. My back was stiff, my shoulder ached, and every time I moved, I remembered Marcus Wellington's sneering face. But what hurt most was the feeling that I had been invisible to him, like my life didn't matter. I made my coffee and sat at my small kitchen table, staring at Marcus's business card. Wellington Real Estate Empire. The gold letters seemed to mock me in the morning light. I had spent the night thinking about what he had said, how he had looked at me, how he had treated me like garbage in front of everyone. Sarah had left her laptop at my apartment the night before, so I decided to look up this Marcus Wellington. What I found made my blood boil. His company website was full of pictures of him in expensive suits, standing in front of mansions and luxury cars. There were photos of him at charity events, shaking hands with politicians and celebrities. The website bragged about his empire of properties and developments across 3 states. But then I found something that made my hands shake with anger. There were pictures of Marcus at a veteran charity event, smiling and holding a big check. The headline read, "Local real estate mogul supports our heroes." In the photo, he was surrounded by veterans in wheelchairs and military families holding their children. I clicked on more links and found article after article about Marcus's generous donations to military causes. He had been featured in magazines and newspapers, always talking about his deep respect for those who serve. But I remembered how he had looked at me the day before, how he had called me old man like it was an insult. The more I read, the angrier I got. This man was using veterans for good publicity while treating real veterans like dirt. He was playing a game, and I was tired of being the one who always lost. I picked up my phone and almost called Sarah, but stopped. What would I tell her? That I was upset about a rich man being mean to me? That I wanted to do something, but didn't know what? Sarah had enough problems with her job and raising 2 kids alone. Instead, I decided to do something I hadn't done in a long time. I was going to drive by Marcus's house. I borrowed Sarah's car and drove to the address I found online. Marcus Wellington lived in Millionaire's Row, the fanciest neighborhood in our town. His house wasn't just big, it was enormous. It looked like a castle with tall columns and a circular driveway that could fit 10 cars. I parked across the street and just stared. The house was surrounded by perfectly trimmed hedges and gardens with flowers that probably cost more than I made in a year. There were 3 cars in the driveway, the black Escalade that had hit me, a red sports car, and a white Mercedes. As I sat there, I saw a woman come out of the house. She was beautiful and well-dressed, probably Marcus's wife. She got into the Mercedes and drove away without noticing me. A few minutes later, 2 kids ran out of the house, followed by a nanny. The kids looked happy and carefree as they climbed into the Escalade. This was Marcus's life. This was what he went home to every night while I sat in my small apartment, wondering how I was going to get to work without a truck. This was the life he was protecting when he looked at me like I was nothing. I was about to drive away when I saw something that made me stop. There was a small sign by the front gate that I hadn't noticed before. It read, Wellington Properties, Military Housing Specialists. Military housing. This man who had treated me like garbage was making money off military families. He was probably getting rich by providing homes for people like me, people who had served their country and deserved better. I drove home feeling even worse than before. It wasn't just that Marcus was rich and I was poor. It wasn't just that he had destroyed my truck and my pride. It was that he was making money off the military community while treating veterans like we were beneath him. That afternoon, I got a call that changed everything. Is this Jake Martinez? The voice was deep and familiar, but I couldn't place it. Yes, this is Jake. This is Sergeant Major Rodriguez. We served together in Afghanistan. My heart nearly stopped. Rodriguez had been my commanding officer during my second tour. He was the toughest, smartest, most respected Marine I had ever known. I hadn't talked to him in 5 years. Rodriguez? How did you get my number? I have my ways, he said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. I heard about what happened yesterday. Some punk named Wellington has been bragging all over social media about putting an old veteran in his place. I felt my face get hot with embarrassment. You saw that. Jake, half the Marine Corps has seen it. This idiot posted a video of your truck getting towed away. He's laughing about how he taught some broke veteran a lesson about parking in spaces meant for real cars. I couldn't believe it. Marcus had filmed my humiliation and put it online for everyone to see. I felt sick to my stomach. But here's the thing, Jake, Rodriguez continued. Some of my guys started looking into this Wellington character after seeing his post. Turns out, we've had our eye on him for a while. What do you mean? His company, Wellington Real Estate Empire, has been getting contracts to provide housing for military families. But there have been complaints. Lots of complaints. Families paying too much for houses that fall apart. Veterans getting kicked out of homes they thought they owned. We've been investigating him for months. I sat down hard in my chair. Are you serious? Dead serious. This man has been ripping off military families for years, Jake. And now he's made the mistake of messing with one of our own. We don't let that slide. My mind was racing. This wasn't just about my truck anymore. This was about something much bigger. What are you going to do? I asked. We're moving tomorrow morning, Rodriguez said. Federal agents, military investigators, the whole 9 yards. We've got enough evidence to shut down his operation and put him in prison. But first, we wanted to make sure you knew what was happening. Why are you telling me this? Because you're the one he decided to mess with. And because when we're done with him, someone needs to make sure the veterans he's hurt get justice. Someone who understands what it means to serve. After Rodriguez hung up, I sat in my apartment staring at the phone. Tomorrow morning, Marcus Wellington's world was going to come crashing down. The man who made me feel small and worthless was about to learn what it meant to mess with the wrong person. But I had no idea just how much my life was about to change. The call from Rodriguez was just the beginning of something that would turn both of our worlds upside down. The phone rang at exactly 6 a.m., and I knew my life was about to change forever. Rodriguez's voice was different this time, serious and angry in a way that made my blood run cold. Jake, we need to meet. Now. What I'm about to tell you will make you sick to your stomach. I threw on my clothes and met Rodriguez at Murphy's Diner, the same place where we used to eat when we were both stationed at Camp Pendleton 20 years ago. He looked older now, with gray hair and lines around his eyes, but he still had that commanding presence that made everyone sit up straight when he walked into a room. You're not going to believe what we found, he said, sliding a thick folder across the table. This Wellington character isn't just some rich guy who treats veterans badly. He's been running a scam that's destroyed dozens of military families. I opened the folder and felt my heart sink. There were photos of rundown houses with broken windows and leaking roofs. There were letters from families begging for help. There were medical bills from children who got sick from mold in their apartments. These are all properties owned by Wellington Real Estate, Rodriguez explained. He gets contracts from the government to provide housing for military families. But instead of giving them decent places to live, he puts them in these dumps and charges them top dollar. I turned the page and saw a photo that made me gasp. It was a young Marine named David Thompson, still in his uniform, standing next to a house that looked like it was falling down. His wife was holding a baby, and they both looked exhausted and defeated. The Thompsons paid Wellington $3,000 a month for that house, Rodriguez said. When they complained about the broken heater and the rats, Wellington kicked them out. They lost everything, their deposit, their furniture, their savings. David had to take a second job, just to pay for a motel room. I kept turning pages, and each story was worse than the last. The Martinez family, no relation to me, had been living in a house with dangerous electrical wiring. When their 6-year-old daughter got shocked and had to go to the hospital, Wellington refused to fix the problem. Instead, he evicted them for damaging his property. How long has this been going on? I asked. At least 5 years, Rodriguez said. Maybe longer. We think he's stolen millions of dollars from military families. And the worst part is, he's been using his fake charity work to get more contracts. He shows up at veterans events, donates a few $1,000s, and then the government gives him millions more in housing contracts. I thought about the photos I had seen online of Marcus at charity events, smiling and shaking hands with veterans. All of it was fake. He was using those pictures to steal from the very people he pretended to help. There's more, Rodriguez said, pulling out another folder. We've been tracking his bank accounts. He's got money hidden all over the world. Houses in 3 different states. Cars, boats, jewelry. All bought with money he stole from military families. My hands were shaking as I looked through the evidence. This wasn't just about my truck anymore. This was about families who had lost their homes, children who had gotten sick, veterans who had been betrayed by someone they trusted. What happened to the families? I asked. Rodriguez's face got dark. Some of them are living in their cars. Some moved back in with their parents. A few had to leave the military because they couldn't afford to stay. And one. He stopped talking and looked out the window. What? What happened? A Marine named Bobby Chun. He and his wife lost their house to Wellington 2 years ago. Bobby couldn't handle the shame of failing his family. He took his own life last winter. I felt like someone had punched me in the stomach. A man was dead because of Marcus Wellington's greed. A fellow Marine had died because he couldn't protect his family from this monster. We're going to get him, Rodriguez said. Tomorrow morning, we're hitting his house with everything we've got. FBI, military investigators, IRS agents. We're going to arrest him and seize all his property. What can I do? I asked. Nothing. Just stay out of the way and let us handle it. This is going to be big, Jake. Really big. The newspapers are going to be all over this story. I drove home in a daze, thinking about everything Rodriguez had told me. Marcus Wellington wasn't just a rich guy who was mean to veterans. He was a criminal who had destroyed lives and driven a good man to suicide. And all I had cared about was my stupid truck. But that night, I got another phone call that changed everything again. Mr. Martinez? This is Linda Thompson, David's wife. Sergeant Major Rodriguez gave me your number. I remembered her from a photo, the young woman holding her baby next to the rundown house. I heard what happened to you, she said. How Wellington destroyed your truck and humiliated you. I wanted you to know that you're not alone. He's done worse to all of us. I'm so sorry for what you've been through, I said. We heard about the investigation, she continued, about how they're going after him tomorrow. But we wanted to ask you something. All of us military families that Wellington hurt, we've been talking. We want to make sure he pays for what he did. RDP. What do you mean? We want you to be our voice. When this is all over, when they seize his property and his money, we want you to make sure it goes to the right people. The families he destroyed. The veterans he cheated. We trust you because you're one of us. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. These families wanted me to help them get justice. Me, the guy who couldn't even protect his own truck. I don't know anything about legal stuff, I said. You don't have to, Linda replied. You just have to care. And we know you do. Wellington picked the wrong veteran to mess with. Tomorrow, when they arrest him, he's going to learn what happens when you hurt one of our own. After I hung up, I sat in my apartment thinking about Bobby Chun, the Marine who had killed himself because of Wellington's greed. I thought about the Thompson family living in a motel room. I thought about all the children who had gotten sick in Wellington's rundown houses. Marcus Wellington thought he had won when he destroyed my truck. He thought he had put me in my place, but he had no idea what was coming for him. And he had no idea that his moment of cruelty was about to destroy his entire world. At 5 a.m., my phone buzzed with a text message that made my heart race. It's happening. Turn on Channel 7 News. Rodriguez. I grabbed the remote and switched on the TV just as the breaking news alert flashed across the screen. The reporter was standing outside Marcus Wellington's mansion, and behind her, I could see something that made me sit up straight. Military trucks. Lots of them. We're here at the home of Marcus Wellington, owner of Wellington Real Estate Empire, where federal agents are conducting what appears to be a massive raid. The reporter said breathlessly. We're seeing FBI vehicles, military police trucks, and IRS agents surrounding this multi-million-dollar estate. I couldn't believe my eyes. There were at least 20 vehicles parked in Marcus's circular driveway and all along the street. Men and women in dark suits and military uniforms were walking in and out of his house, carrying boxes and computer equipment. Then I saw him. Marcus Wellington, the man who had destroyed my truck and called me an old man, was standing on his front porch in silk pajamas and slippers. Even from a distance, I could see that he was furious and scared. Sir, can you tell us what's happening? The reporter called out to him. Marcus pushed past the FBI agents and walked toward the camera. This is a mistake, he shouted. I'm a respected businessman. I donate to charity. I support our veterans. I almost laughed out loud. Here was the man who had humiliated me, who had treated me like garbage, trying to hide behind his fake charity work. Mr. Wellington, the reporter pressed, we're hearing reports that you're being investigated for fraud involving military housing contracts. Can you comment on that? Marcus's face turned red. That's a lie. I've never done anything wrong. I'm being set up. Just then, a tall woman in an FBI jacket walked up to Marcus and showed him some papers. I couldn't hear what she was saying, but I could see Marcus's face getting paler by the second. You can't do this, he screamed. I have lawyers. I have friends in high places. The FBI agent said something else, and Marcus's shoulders slumped. He looked defeated and small, nothing like the confident man who had sneered at me in the parking lot. My phone rang. It was Rodriguez. Are you watching? He asked. I can't believe it, I said. How many agents are there? 57, Rodriguez replied. FBI, military police, IRS, and a few other agencies I can't talk about. We've been planning this for months, Jake. Wellington is done. On the TV, I watched as agents led Marcus away from his house in handcuffs. He wasn't wearing his expensive suit anymore. He looked like what he really was, a criminal who had been caught. What happens now? I asked Rodriguez. Now we count the money, he said. We've already found bank accounts in 5 different countries. We've seized his cars, his boats, his vacation homes. Everything he bought with stolen money is going back to the families he hurt. I thought about Linda Thompson and her baby living in a motel room while Marcus lived in his mansion. I thought about Bobby Chun, the Marine who had killed himself because of Wellington's greed. Rodriguez, I said, the families want me to help make sure the money goes to the right people. I know, he replied. Linda Thompson called me. So did 12 other families. They all said the same thing. They want you to be their voice. But I don't know how to do that. You'll learn. And Jake, there's something else. Something I haven't told you yet. My heart started beating faster. What? When we searched Wellington's office, we found a list. It's a list of veterans he planned to target next. Your name was on it. I felt cold all over. What do you mean? He was going to come after you again. He had your address, your daughter's information, your work history. He was planning to make your life hell, just because he could. I couldn't believe it. It wasn't enough for Marcus to destroy my truck and humiliate me. He wanted to keep hurting me, keep making me feel small and worthless. There's more, Rodriguez continued. He had lists for other veterans too. Guys who had crossed him, guys who had complained about his properties, guys who had tried to get help from the VA. He was going to destroy all of them. I thought about all the veterans in our town, all the good people who had served their country and just wanted to live quiet lives. Marcus Wellington had been planning to hurt them all. How many names were on the list? I asked. 43, Rodriguez said. 43 veterans he wanted to destroy just because he enjoyed having power over people. I sat down hard on my couch. This man wasn't just a criminal. He was evil. He got pleasure from hurting people who had served their country. Jake, are you still there? Yeah, I'm here. The families want to meet with you tonight. All of them. They're driving in from all over the state. They want to plan what happens next. What do you mean? Wellington's trial is going to be big news. The families want to make sure everyone knows what he did. They want to make sure he gets the maximum punishment. And they want to make sure his money goes to help veterans, not back to the government. I looked at the TV where Marcus was being put into the back of a police car. He looked confused and scared, like he couldn't believe this was happening to him. Rodriguez, I said, what if I mess this up? What if I let these families down? You won't, he replied. You know why? Because you care about the right things. You care about honor and service and taking care of each other. Wellington only cared about money and power. That's why he's in handcuffs and you're not. After I hung up, I sat in my apartment watching the news coverage. The reporter was interviewing neighbors who said they always knew something wasn't right about Marcus Wellington. They talked about how he was rude to service workers and how he had called the police on kids for playing in the street. But what got to me was when they interviewed a Marine who had lost his house to Wellington. The man was crying as he talked about how his children had gotten sick from mold in their apartment. He said he had tried to get help, but Wellington had threatened to sue him if he complained. This man destroyed my family, the Marine said. But now maybe other families won't have to go through what we did. I realized then that this wasn't just about getting revenge on Marcus Wellington. It was about making sure he could never hurt anyone else again. It was about turning his stolen money into something good for the veterans he had tried to destroy. My phone rang again. It was Linda Thompson. Jake, we're all meeting at the VFW hall tonight at 7. Can you be there? Yes, I said. I'll be there. Good, because we have a lot of work to do. And Jake, what happened to your truck? That was just the beginning. Wellington has no idea what he started when he messed with one of our own. The VFW hall had never been so packed, and I had never felt so nervous walking through those doors. 43 military families were waiting for me, and every single one of them had been hurt by Marcus Wellington. Jake, Linda Thompson called out when she saw me. She was holding her baby, but she looked different now, stronger somehow, like she had hope for the first time in years. Everyone, this is Jake Martinez, the Marine we told you about. The room got quiet as dozens of eyes turned to look at me. I saw young Marines who still looked like kids, older veterans with gray hair and tired faces, wives holding children, and grandparents who had probably served in Vietnam. All of them had one thing in common. Marcus Wellington had stolen their money and broken their trust. A tall black man in his 30s stood up and walked over to me. I'm David Thompson, he said, shaking my hand firmly. My wife Linda and I want to thank you for agreeing to help us. I haven't done anything yet, I said. Yes, you have, said an older woman from the back of the room. You survived what Wellington did to you, and you didn't give up. That gives the rest of us hope. Her name was Maria Santos, and she had served as an army nurse in Iraq. Wellington had rented her a house that had black mold in the walls. When her 8-year-old son got sick and had to be hospitalized, Wellington had refused to fix the problem and then evicted her for complaining too much. My son still has breathing problems, Maria said, her voice shaking with anger. The doctors say he might never be completely healthy again, all because Wellington was too cheap to fix a problem he knew about. One by one, the families told me their stories. Each one was worse than the last. There was Carlos Rivera, a Navy veteran who had lost his leg in Afghanistan. Wellington had rented him a house with broken wheelchair ramps and then charged him extra money for modifications. When Carlos complained, Wellington had threatened to evict him and his disabled wife. There was Jennifer Kim, whose husband had died in combat. Wellington had promised her a safe place to raise her 2 young daughters, then put them in a house in a dangerous neighborhood with broken locks and no security lights. When someone tried to break in, Wellington had told her it was her own fault for not being careful enough. The worst story came from an elderly man named Robert Chen. He was Bobby Chen's father, the Marine who had killed himself because of Wellington's cruelty. My son was a good boy, Robert said, tears streaming down his face. He served 3 tours in Afghanistan. He came home wanting to start a family, to build a life. Wellington destroyed all of that. He took my son's money, his home, and finally his hope. Bobby felt like he had failed as a husband and father. He couldn't live with that shame. The room was completely silent. I could hear people crying softly, and I felt my own eyes filling with tears. This wasn't just about money or houses. Marcus Wellington had destroyed lives, broken families, and driven a good man to take his own life. What do you want me to do? I asked. Linda Thompson stood up. We want you to make sure Wellington pays for what he did. RDP, not just with money, but with his freedom. We want him to go to prison for a long, long time. And we want to make sure his money goes to the right places, added David. Not back to the government, not to some fancy lawyers. To the families he hurt and to programs that actually help veterans. A young Marine named Tommy Wilson raised his hand. I heard on the news that they seized millions of dollars from Wellington. Houses, cars, bank accounts, everything. Is that true? I thought about what Rodriguez had told me. Yes, it's true. The FBI found money hidden all over the world. They think he stole at least $20 million from military families. The room buzzed with angry voices. $20 million. That was more money than any of them would see in their lifetimes, and Wellington had stolen it from people who had risked their lives for their country. Here's what we're going to do, I said, surprised by the confidence in my own voice. We're going to work with the prosecutors to make sure Wellington gets the maximum prison sentence. We're going to testify at his trial if we have to. And we're going to fight to make sure every penny of his stolen money goes back to military families. An older veteran named Frank Murphy stood up. What makes you think they'll listen to us? We're just regular people. Wellington has expensive lawyers and rich friends. Because we have something he doesn't, I replied. We have the truth, and we have each other. Wellington thought he could pick us off one by one, make us feel small and powerless. But look around this room. We're not alone anymore. Maria Santos nodded. Jake's right. Wellington counted on us being too ashamed or too scared to fight back. He thought we would just take his abuse and stay quiet. Well, we're not staying quiet anymore, Linda Thompson said firmly. We're going to tell everyone what he did. The newspapers, the TV stations, the internet. Everyone is going to know that Marcus Wellington is a criminal who stole from veterans. I looked around the room at all these brave people who had served their country and then been betrayed by someone they should have been able to trust. They were ready to fight, and they wanted me to lead them. There's something else, I said. Something Rodriguez told me today. When they searched Wellington's office, they found a list of veterans he planned to target next. My name was on it, and so were 42 others. The room erupted in angry voices. People were shouting about what they wanted to do to Wellington, how they couldn't believe he was planning to hurt even more families. That's why we have to stop him, I continued. Not just for ourselves, but for all the veterans he was planning to hurt. We have to make sure he never gets the chance to destroy another family. Tommy Wilson stood up. What do we do first? Tomorrow morning, I'm meeting with the federal prosecutor handling Wellington's case. I said, I'm going to tell her about all of you, about what he did to your families. I'm going to make sure she understands that this isn't just about money. It's about justice. What if she doesn't listen? Asked Jennifer Kim. Then we make her listen, I replied. We go to the newspapers. We go to the TV stations. We make so much noise that the whole country knows what Marcus Wellington did to veterans and their families. As the meeting ended, people came up to shake my hand and thank me. But I was the one who should have been thanking them. They had given me something I hadn't felt in years, a sense of purpose. For the first time since I left the Marines, I felt like I was part of something important again. Robert Chun, Bobby's father, was the last person to approach me. He pressed a folded piece of paper into my hand. This is the last letter my son wrote, he said quietly. He wrote it the night before he died. I want you to read it, so you understand what we're really fighting for. I put the letter in my pocket without looking at it. I knew that when I read it, there would be no turning back. Wellington had destroyed my truck and hurt my pride, but he had taken this man's son. And for that, he was going to pay. I couldn't sleep that night, So at 3 a.m., I finally pulled out Bobby Chin's letter and read the word that would change everything for me. Dear Dad, I'm sorry I failed you. I'm sorry I failed my wife. I promised I would take care of our family, but I lost everything to a man who saw us as nothing more than dollar signs. I can't live with the shame of being so weak, so stupid. Please tell Jenny I love her and that this isn't her fault. Wellington wins. I lose. I am sorry. I sat in my kitchen, crying like I hadn't cried since my mother died. This young Marine, this hero who had served our country with honor, had felt so worthless that he took his own life. All because Marcus Wellington enjoyed having power over people who couldn't fight back. At 8 a.m. sharp, I walked into the federal courthouse wearing my best shirt and tie. The building was huge and intimidating, with marble floors and security guards everywhere. I had never been inside a place like this, but I wasn't going to let that stop me. Assistant District Attorney Rebecca Williams was a small woman with sharp eyes and a firm handshake. Her office was filled with law books and case files, and on her desk was a photo of her in military uniform. You serve? I asked, pointing at the picture. Army JAG Corps, she replied. 2 tours in Iraq. That's why I specifically asked to handle the Wellington case. What he did to military families makes me sick. She opened a thick file folder and spread photos across her desk. I recognized some of them from Rodriguez's briefing. The rundown houses, the sick children, the eviction notices. Mr. Martinez, I want you to know that we're going to prosecute Marcus Wellington to the full extent of the law, she said. We have him on fraud, racketeering, tax evasion, and about 20 other charges. He's looking at 30 years in federal prison. What about the families? I asked. What about getting their money back? That's where it gets complicated, she said. Normally, when we seize assets in a case like this, the money goes back to the federal government. But these families were the direct victims of Wellington's crimes. They deserve to be compensated. She pulled out another folder, this one even thicker than the first. We've identified 67 military families that Wellington defrauded over the past 5 years. The total amount stolen is just over $24 million. We've seized $26 million in assets from Wellington, his houses, cars, bank accounts, investments, everything. I couldn't believe the numbers. $24 million stolen from veterans and their families. No wonder Wellington could afford that mansion and those expensive cars. The good news is that there's enough money to compensate every family he hurt, with some left over, Williams continued. The bad news is that it could take years to sort through all the legal paperwork unless we can find a faster way. What kind of faster way? She leaned forward in her chair. The families would need to organize themselves into a group and choose someone to represent them in court. Someone who could speak for all of them and help us distribute the money fairly. I knew what she was getting at. The families want me to be that person. I know, she said. Linda Thompson called me yesterday. So did 12 other families. They all said the same thing. They trust you to fight for them. Williams pulled out a legal document and slid it across the desk. This would make you the official representative of all the victims in the Wellington case. You would work with our office to make sure the money gets to the right people. You would also have a say in Wellington's sentencing. My hands were shaking as I looked at the papers. This was more responsibility than I had ever had in my life. What if I made a mistake? What if I let these families down? I don't know anything about legal stuff, I said. You don't have to, Williams replied. That's what I'm here for. But you know these families. You understand what they've been through. You can make sure they get justice. I thought about Bobby Chin's letter, about Maria Santos' sick son, about all the families living in motels and cars because of Wellington's greed. What happens to Wellington? I asked. That depends partly on you, she said. As the victim's representative, you would have the right to speak at his sentencing hearing. You could tell the judge how his crimes affected these families. Your words could be the difference between Wellington getting 20 years or 30 years in prison. I signed the papers. William smiled for the first time since I had walked in her office. There's something else, she said. Something I think you'll find very interesting. She pulled out a manila envelope and dumped its contents on the desk. It was Wellington's cell phone, computer printouts, and what looked like bank records. When we arrested Wellington, we found some very interesting things on his phone, she said. Text messages to his friends, bragging about how he had put some old veteran in his place. Photos of your destroyed truck that he sent to other business owners, laughing about how veterans were too stupid to fight back. I felt my face getting hot with anger. Even after destroying my truck and humiliating me, Wellington had kept making fun of me to entertain his rich friends. But here's the best part, Williams continued. We also found his plans for what he was going to do next. He wasn't just going to target the veterans on his list. He was planning to expand his operation to 3 more states. He wanted to steal from hundreds more military families. She showed me printouts of emails between Wellington and other crooked businessmen. They were planning to set up fake companies that would get government contracts to provide housing for veterans. They were going to steal millions more dollars and destroy hundreds more families. If you hadn't fought back, if these families hadn't come forward, Wellington would have kept growing his criminal empire, Williams said. You didn't just save yourselves. You saved hundreds of other veterans from being victimized. I thought about all the families who would never know how close they had come to losing everything to Marcus Wellington. All because a rich man had decided to destroy my old truck and call me names. When does Wellington go to trial? I asked. 6 months, Williams replied. But before that, we need to get the compensation process started. The families need their money now, not years from now. Are you ready to fight for them? I stood up and shook her hand. I've been ready since the day Wellington called me an old man. As I walked out of the courthouse, I thought about how much my life had changed in just a few days. I had gone from being a nobody whose truck got destroyed to being the voice of dozens of military families seeking justice. It was scary and overwhelming, but it also felt right. Wellington had picked the wrong veteran to mess with. He thought he could break me, humiliate me, and then move on to his next victim. Instead, he had awakened something in me that I thought I had lost when I left the Marines, the determination to fight for what's right, no matter how powerful the enemy. My phone buzzed with a text from Rodriguez. Heard you signed papers. Proud of you, Marine. Wellington has no idea what's coming for him. I smiled as I walked to Sarah's car. Rodriguez was right. Marcus Wellington was about to learn what happens when you declare war on the United States Marine Corps and the families they protect. And this was one war he was definitely going to lose. 3 months later, I was standing in the driveway of what used to be Marcus Wellington's mansion, and I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Military trucks were parked everywhere, but this time they weren't there to arrest anyone. They were there to help. Jake, over here, Rodriguez called out, waving me toward the front door. You need to see this. I walked up the marble steps that I had only dreamed of walking on before. The same steps where Marcus had been arrested and his silk pajamas were now being used by Marine volunteers, carrying boxes of supplies and furniture. Inside the mansion, the scene was even more amazing. The huge living room that had probably hosted fancy parties for rich people was now filled with military families sorting through donations. Children were running around playing while their parents worked, and for the first time in months, everyone looked happy. This is incredible, I said to Rodriguez. How did you organize all this so fast? It wasn't me, he replied with a grin. It was the families. Once word got out that Wellington's assets were being distributed, every military family in 3 states wanted to help. They've been working day and night to turn this place into a temporary shelter. Linda Thompson walked over carrying a clipboard and looking like a woman on a mission. Jake, perfect timing. I need you to see something in Wellington's old office. She led me down a hallway lined with expensive paintings that were now being taken down and replaced with photos of military families. Wellington's office, which had once been a shrine to his wealth and power, was now a command center for helping veterans. Look at this, Linda said, pointing to a wall covered with papers. These are all the families that have gotten their money back so far. 43 families, just like you promised. I looked at the list and felt my heart swell with pride. Each name represented a family that Wellington had hurt, and now they were getting justice. Next to each name was a dollar amount. Some got $50,000, some got over $100,000. All money that Wellington had stolen from them. Maria Santos bought a new house, Linda continued. A safe one with no mold. Her son's breathing is already getting better. Carlos Rivera got enough money to buy a specially equipped van for his wheelchair. Jennifer Kim moved her daughters to a safe neighborhood and paid for their college funds. I walked over to the window and looked out at the backyard where Wellington used to host his fancy parties. Now it was filled with military families having a barbecue, their children playing on the expensive playground equipment that Wellington had installed for his own kids. "There's something else," Linda said quietly. "Something we've been working on as a surprise for you." She handed me another clipboard with more papers. At the top, it said Special Compensation Fund for Jake Martinez. "What is this?" I asked. "Every family that got money back wanted to give you something," she explained. "You didn't just help us get justice. You gave up months of your life to fight for us. You deserve to be compensated too." I looked at the papers and saw that each family had contributed money to a fund for me. Some gave $100, some gave $1,000. The total was over $60,000. "I can't take this," I said. "I didn't do this for money." "We know," said a voice behind me. I turned around and saw Robert Chun, Bobby's father, standing in the doorway. "That's exactly why you deserve it. Wellington took everything from us because he was greedy. You gave us everything back because you cared." He walked over and put his hand on my shoulder. "My son would be proud of what you've done. You made sure his death wasn't for nothing." I felt tears starting to form in my eyes. This whole thing had started because Wellington destroyed my truck and called me an old man. Now, 3 months later, he was in prison and his mansion was being used to help the very people he had tried to hurt. "There's one more surprise," Linda said with a smile. "Come with me." She led me back outside to the circular driveway where Wellington's cars used to be parked. Now, there was a different vehicle sitting there, a brand new pickup truck with a big red bow on it. "The families pooled their money together," Linda explained. "We know your old truck meant a lot to you. This one is yours, free and clear. No payments, no strings attached." I walked around the truck in amazement. It was a beautiful blue Ford F-150, exactly like the one I'd always dreamed of owning but could never afford. The license plate read Marine One, and there was a small American flag sticker on the back window. I don't know what to say. I managed to get out. "Don't say anything," said David Thompson, walking up with his wife and baby. "Just know that you've got a family now. 43 families, actually, and we take care of our own." As I looked around at all the faces surrounding me, families that had been broken by Wellington's greed but were now healing together, I realized that this was bigger than just getting revenge on one bad man. This was about creating something good from something terrible. "What happens to the mansion?" I asked. Rodriguez stepped forward. "The court has agreed to let us use it as a temporary shelter for displaced veterans while we figure out a permanent solution. Wellington's lawyers tried to fight it, but the judge said that using his stolen money to help veterans was poetic justice." I laughed at that. Poetic justice indeed. The man who had made millions by putting veterans in terrible housing was now having his own mansion used to give them safe, comfortable places to live. "Where is Wellington now?" I asked. "County jail," Rodriguez replied. "His trial starts next week. His lawyers have been trying to get him a plea deal, but the prosecutor says no way. He's going to face every single charge." I thought about Marcus Wellington sitting in a jail cell, probably in an orange jumpsuit instead of his expensive suits. I wondered if he understood yet what he had lost. Not just his money and his freedom, but his reputation, his family's respect, and any chance of ever being seen as anything other than a criminal who stole from veterans. "Are you ready for the trial?" Linda asked. "I've been ready since the day he called me an old man," I replied. That night, I drove home in my new truck thinking about everything that had happened. I had gone from being a victim to being a voice for justice. I had helped 43 families get their lives back. And most importantly, I had made sure that Marcus Wellington would never hurt another veteran again. But the best part was still to come. Next week, I would get to look Wellington in the eye one more time, and this time, I would be the one with all the power. The courthouse was packed on the day of Marcus Wellington's sentencing, and I had never felt more nervous or more ready in my life.